Okay, let's open up to Genesis chapter 29. Genesis chapter 29. New American Standard Bible has this titled as Jacob Meets Rachel. Jacob meets Rachel. This is interesting. And before we jump into it, who are the sisters? What's her sister's name? Rachel's sister? Do you know what those names mean? Rachel means ewe lamb, and Leah means wild cow. I know, terrible thing you would call your daughter. But I do not believe it's because of what you may be thinking in your mind. We'll get to that when we get down to the eyes of Leah. Okay, let's start with verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. Went on his journey. That's literally, he lifted up his feet. If you remember from last week, so he kind of had to leave home, right? Esau wanted to kill him, but Rebekah gave him an out with his father Isaac to send him up north to Laban to find a wife. But they all knew he was leaving because he was in trouble. I don't think he felt like he had to leave quickly. But he was stressed about leaving home, leaving his mother. He's kind of destroyed his relationship with his dad. Definitely destroyed his relationship with his brother. He was stressed about that. He was stressed about his standing. I don't think Jacob wanted to be this kind of man. I don't think this is what he wanted. And then the Lord appeared to him there at Bethel. And after that, you have this phrase when he leaves from there and begins to look for where he's going. That's when verse 1 here. He went on his journey. Literally, he lifted up his feet. That's a Hebrew idiom. We would say he has a spring in his step. Somebody who is kind of, their spirits has been lifted. He's a little bit more excited, probably because God talked to him. That gave him some encouragement and some strength he really needed because he was feeling pretty down over everything that had transpired over the last chapter. So he's a little excited. Verses 2 through 3. He looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. For from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. In the Hebrew, there's actually 2 behold statements. And that's usually because you use that statement to grab someone's attention or because of some sort of surprise. Behold, there's flocks, and behold, there's shepherds in the well. What's going on is, I think Jacob was a little surprised. Remember we talked about this last week. There's no roads leading you where you want to go. He's looking for the city of Haran. He's looking for Laban, his uncle. And so he was surprised. Not only did he find a well, walk upon a well, there was people there at the well at the time he came. So he's a bit surprised, but I think this is the providence of God. He's with him to help him along the way. And he sees the well. It's got a big stone on it, and that huge stone will have a smaller hole in the middle. And upon that was a larger stone, and that's going to be significant here in just a little bit. So he sees all these things. So of course he comes down there. Verse 4, 5, and 6. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where are you from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." And he said to them, Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. And here is Rachel, his daughter, coming with the sheep." Now he's asking these questions because he wants to find out, have I come to the right place? He was expecting to arrive in a general area and then kind of walk around to get his bearing, find the city or something, to find out where he needs to go to find the city. And he came right upon the very place he wanted to be. Providence of God is with him. So he's got to be really excited. Things are going really well for him. And behold, here comes Rachel. This is his daughter. So things are working out so well for Jacob. So he sees all these things. Verse 7, verse 7. Now verse 7, 7a, this is an interesting verse. Makes you wonder, why is it there? So he's still talking to those shepherds. Jacob said, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep, and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered, and they roll the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." It was easy to look up why this is happening, but why is this even here? First, let me tell you what's happening, and then I'll tell you what my thoughts of why it's in the scripture for us to read. What's going on is you have this huge, large stone. It's larger than what a single man could really move. And all these people, they gather together, but they cannot move the stone until everyone gathers together and they all share in the well. They pull the water up out of the well. And so they're waiting. But why are these guys are there early? Because they wanted to be first in line. When everyone shows up, they move the stone, they get to water their flocks first, and then they move on. I think this passage is here so we get a little insight on the knowledge and the efficacy of Jacob. He is a very good shepherd. He immediately recognized what was going on. He was saying, "Why are you wasting your time? You ought to be out there fattening up your flocks." That's what he would do, because he knows how to handle sheep, and he knows how to be a good shepherd. And we're going to see that when he gets over there to Laban. I think that's why this is here. He knows how this operation should work, and he would run this operation a little differently. I think it pained him to see all these people sitting around doing nothing, and the sheep just sitting there. They ought to be either watered and sent off to eat, or they should be eating and then come water and then back. Not be sitting around doing nothing. He would run the ship a little tighter. I think that's what we're meant to see here. And so they talk about, we cannot until the flocks are gathered, and they roll the stone. It takes more than one person to roll the stone. Verses 9 and 10. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Do you think Jacob is strong? That big stone is put there so not one man can move it. They don't want anyone taking the water by themselves. It's a group. A whole bunch of groups all use that together. That's strong for him to move that rock. I tried to find an example, a picture I could show you, but I couldn't find anything like that. How old do you think Jacob is? I know Jim has been asking, how old is Jacob at this point, or Isaac and whatnot. Well, we know how old he is. Anyone know how old Jacob is here? Well, yeah, we were thinking that, but I found this in commentaries, but I also was able to reason out. I read ahead, and all the way back, let me get my notes, all the way back over in the time of when Joseph, remember where Joseph was sold as a slave, and we're told how old he is when he was sold as a slave, that he was 17 years old. And then time goes by, he's down there in Egypt, and when he is made the second most powerful man in the land of Egypt, it tells us he is at the age of 30 is when that happens. How many years goes by before Jacob and his family are brought to Egypt? You got the 7 years of plenty, right? And then how many years into the famine until the brothers started coming back and forth? 2. And it's within that same year that Jacob comes down. So he is 39 years old. Joseph is 39 years old when Pharaoh asks Jacob how old he is. And he says he is, you remember, 130 years old. So that means you take the 39 away, and he is 91 years old when Joseph was born. So that brings us all the way back to the next chapter, which we're not going to get into tonight. And he is born, the text tells us there in, did I write it down? chapter 30, verse 24, she named him Joseph, saying, "May the Lord give me another son." Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own place into my own country." So he just finished the second 7-year stint for Rachel. So that makes him 77 years old when he moves the stone. 77. That's right.
The shepherd's lazy.
Or lazy. Well, I'm more thinking that how old is Rachel and Leah? We know he's 77. And they're not going to be old. They're pretty young. So that's interesting. Yeah, I know. That was my face. I was like, I had to go back and check it and double check all those numbers, but it's there. You can look up those things. I have the passages written down if you're interested in looking at it a little deeper. Yeah. Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah, so I wonder why we're getting that crackling. Okay. Go ahead. What was your question?
So he was, I thought he was
Yeah, he's the 11th son. Benjamin will be the 12th son, and he won't be born for a while. And then Rachel will die. Spoiler warning. Well, all of them are born. Most commentators think they're born within that 7-year period. Well, they are. Yeah, they're all born within that. Well, within within that 7-year period, because he doesn't marry Leah till after the first 7 years, and he marries her. He finishes the week, and then he marries Rachel, and so you got 7 years, and it's at the end of that 7 years that Joseph is born.
That's what you, sorry.
And so
I would assume some of them.
all but Benjamin.
They weren't in the first 4 to 7 years.
No, they can't be, because he doesn't marry Leah till after the first 7 years. Yeah, they do. He does. At the end of the 7 years, he ends up marrying Leah, which we're going to look at in a moment. He figures out, oh, that was wrong, and then Laban says, well, give her week. He's got to finish it out. He does, and then he marries Rachel, and then he serves another 7 years for Rachel. So we'll look at that here in just a moment. We're kind of jumping the gun. So he sees her. He's, I think, showing off. He moves the stone, waters a flock. Verses 11 and 12. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he related to Laban all these things. Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. So Jacob is feeling really good. Things are just falling into place. Things are going so well. He's got a spring in his step. Are you still getting a crackling noise? Is it that bad? Why? Did it go away? So maybe it's my voice. Is it back? I turned the volume down and back up on this guy. Maybe it's this guy. Well, then they won't hear anything. Oh, that's true. We don't need that on. Okay. Apologize for that. So, Jacob is excited. He's got that spring in his step. Things are going so well. And I think he was looking for this. God's blessing him. But sin has its consequences. So he goes to Laban. Laban hears all these words about him. And I think what Laban is trying to ascertain is he really a relative? So he's listening to the story, probably asking questions. Things line up. He said, I believe you. You are my flesh and my bone. And he stays with him for 1 month. Verses 15 to 17. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now let's stop there for a moment. Now Jacob's been there for a month. What do you think Laban has been able to ascertain about Jacob? Now, things we've already that Moses has shown us in the text. Do you think he figured out that he probably knows how to be a good shepherd? I think so. You think he knows that he really likes Rachel? And yeah, I mean, we're going to see that he is head over heels for her. He recognizes it. I think what he's doing here is he wants Jacob to make the offer for her, and to see what kind of offer he puts out on the table. If you're good at dealing, that's what you want. You always want the other person to make the deal first and work there. And so that's what he's trying to get Jacob to do, which is going to work. So, hey, I don't want you to be here and work for nothing. What should I pay you? Now Laban, verse 16, had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days, because of his love for her, love at first sight, right? So let's look this through. First, let's take a look at that phrase given to Leah about her eyes. The New American Standard says weak. Literally, it's tender. Her eyes are tender. Most commentators, and I agree with them, think that this has to do with the color of her eyes. The ancient Orientals valued dark eyes. They saw that as being vibrant and bright. They found it to be beautiful. And so a lot of people think that her eyes were probably, a lighter blue, or in that case, and so she would be lowered in their eyes when they would look at her, and would not be prized as a wife. I do not think she was like super ugly or looked like a cow, as some say, because as we're going to see here in just a little bit, Jacob did not, by her form, did not know it wasn't Rachel. So he tells Laban that I will give you 7 years for Rachel. So obviously Laban jumps on that 7 years. So he does that, yeah. But no big deal to Jacob. That was nothing at all because of his love for Rachel. And then we get to verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her. So marry her. Now, it's interesting that he had to instigate it. He's the one that had to instigate. Laban was probably going to let this ride as long as he could. Jacob pushed the button, said, hey, give me my wife so I can leave. I want to go home. So Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. As we'll also see, that happens with Rachel, and that's because these two will be important when it comes to the sons being born in the next chapter. So a lot of people always talk about how did he not know? Well, it's dark. Who knows, maybe they were whispering, there wasn't much talking, and he just didn't know until the morning. And I bet you when he got Rachel, he probably took her to the firelight first, just to make sure he had the right daughter before he took her into the tent. Now, Laban did this. He's definitely wrong in this, but Leah could have said something. Why didn't she say anything? Well, she's a dutiful daughter. She's doing what she's told, but I also think she knows her chance of ever getting a husband is next to none. It wasn't going to happen. Why aren't any of the daughters of Laban married off yet? Why not? Yeah, and then there's Rachel, but Rachel's beautiful. If you know If you lived around in that town, you probably know Laban. And do you want to be tied to him? We're going to find out, no, not a good guy. And we're going to really see that when we see what God tells them when he's chasing after Jacob, after Jacob tries to leave. And God tells him, don't you say anything good or bad. You just say what you need, pretty much, is what God's saying. You say what you need and you leave. Nothing. Don't even praise him. Nothing good, nothing bad. Just say your piece and leave. He's not a good guy. He's not a good guy, especially what he did here. So we'll go ahead and read the rest of that. We got plenty of time. Verse 25, so it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me? But Laban said, it is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also for the service which you will serve with me for another 7 years. It is not the custom of this place to marry off the younger before the older. Well, if that's true, and yeah, but you should have made that clear. And what was the deal that he made? What was it for? It was for Rachel. He's a liar. Absolute total lie right in Jacob's face, and Jacob knows it. But he accepts it. Now he could send her away, couldn't he? He could. And that would look bad on Laban, it would look bad on Leah, and he could take Rachel. But he doesn't. Why not? I have my theory. I think Jacob feels like he deserves this. He is getting exactly what he gave to Esau and to his father Isaac. He deceived his dad just as bad as he's being deceived now by Laban. And I think he feels guilty. He gets a little upset, but he accepts the deal. And it tells us, so he tells him to do that, verse 28. Jacob did so and completed her week, and he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. So at the end of that week, he marries Rachel. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah, thank you, to his daughter Rachel as her maid. Now the word maid is literally slave girl. They're just trying to make it sound nicer, but they're slaves is what they are. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years. Another 7 years. Why serve another 7 years? Well, I think it's because he felt like he deserved it for all that he had done to his father and to Esau. And so 14 years. Now, we're not going to look at verses 31 to the end of the chapter today. I don't know why they put the chapter break where they did for chapter 30. Verses 31 to 35 are the children are starting to be born, so that should all go down there to chapter 30. So we're going to leave it there with those. And we'll look at a little bit closer, probably go into some of the future texts about Leah and Rachel and the attitude that changes for Jacob with both the girls. I think his attitude toward Leah, the older, changes a lot over the years. Because where does he bury Rachel? Where does he bury Leah? And that's especially with all his fathers. Something changes. I think, yeah, she's the only one. Rachel doesn't make it past the birth of Benjamin. And also when she names him, he changes the name. I think his love for her changes, and he really starts to love the older, and that relationship changes. I think he changes a lot over this time. Becomes a better man because of the things that he had done, the things that happened to him. Any other comments or questions on the text? This is a pivotal moment for Jacob in his life. He's learning a lot. So He's going to be 14 years, and then he'll serve it. We'll see next week. Or no, not. I won't be here next week. But the week after that, he'll serve another 6 years before he finally leaves. So he's a strong fella for 77, and now he plus 14 years. He's up there. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no. I mean, just saying, why would he agree to 7 years for Rachel? He already did the 7 years for Rachel. He should have just said, no, I have Leah. You give me Rachel because that's who I served 7 years for. He had an argument there. That's right. And I think he felt like he deserved it. He's a peaceable man. Remember that from the very beginning? He is not someone that wants to stir the pot. And he did, and I think he felt really bad what happened over there with Esau and with his father. And he's changing. All right. Any other comments or questions? No. You know? I don't know when or where, but I mean, that is true. That is true. That is a good point. That he buries her on the side of the road, and he buries Leah with the tomb of his fathers. I don't know. Just a thought. Yeah. Well, maybe, but man. Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. Oh, the circumference. Yeah, I don't think that's the way they moved it. Ten Commandments. Yeah, in the movie they showed them with a thing on their shoulders, huge coffin, and so it just looked like there's no way they went 2.5 months or all the way carry that whole time, all those years. They probably just, all right, let's put him in a bag, guys. So anyway, yes, he was. All right, number 5.